The summer movie season is already underway. The blockbusters so far have included some of Hollywood's biggest names: Tom Cruise in Minority Report, Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man, and Adam Sandler in this past weekend's #1 film at the box office, Mr. Deeds, which made $37 million, which for reasons I hope we're going to be able to explain here tonight. There are still more big hits to come, with Will Smith, Tom Hanks, Paul Newman, Mel Gibson, and Mike Myers, to name just a few. Here's a look at some of the summer's big films.
Grand Theft Auto, reckless endangerment, and that little bridge stunt of yours.
Excuse me while I kiss the sky.
But if you do what I want, I'll make all your criminal transgressions go away.
Dad! Hello, son.
Your spy car's a mini.
It's not the size, mate. It's how you use it.
Chop that wood. Yeah, that's it.
Oh, you're sick! You're sick! Why would you do that to me? I'm just kidding you, pal.
Like there's a ghost right behind me, isn't there?
Whitworth, it's Whitworth. Who's the victim? Somebody. Who? Somebody. Leo Crow.
Oh, who is he?
I have no idea. I've never heard of him. But I'm supposed to kill him in less than 36 hours.
I'm press. Which paper? All over. I'm something of a rarity. How's that? I shoot the dead.
You spend as much time practicing your saber techniques as you do your wit. You would rival Master Yoda as a swordsman. I thought I already did. Only in your mind, my very young apprentice.
People, we got a bug in the electrical system. Oh, now y'all running.
Joining me now for a consideration of this summer's movies, A.O. Scott from the New York Times, from Time Magazine, Richard Corliss, Owen Gleiberman from Entertainment Weekly, and from Premiere Magazine, Glenn Kenny. Welcome. And first of all, Charlie, we wish you were here. I really wish you were here for many reasons, but first of all, so I could ask you about how you took the plot of Attack of the Clones. I saw that with an audience, a full house of people who really thought they had to be there on the first weekend and were so miserable. I mean, every now and then they would perk up, but basically you had the feeling that they were doing time, that this was just an obligatory thing. How do we feel about so many sequels being around this summer?
It's just part and parcel of the business, and we might as well just gird our loins, because given the opening weekend of Scooby-Doo, there's going to be a sequel to that too. The thing about the Star Wars fans is that there's all sorts of different factions among them, and I think among the harder core guys, there actually is an enthusiasm. They'll parse out these little plot twists and say, okay, why was Anakin's mother still alive, and this, that, and the other thing, and they argue over it like theologians discussing the Dead Sea Scrolls. But people who aren't, haven't gotten that level of devotion, you might call it, are not necessarily going to care.
Well, speaking of Men in Black and Star Wars, those are both big special effects movies. What do we think about the state of special effects this summer? I think things have really gone to a new level in a way.
A good level.
Great level. An idea of just taking some of this technology for granted and really going with it instead of showing it off.
Well, that's what I liked about the clones. If I may, not to. I'll just leave the room while the rest of you bash it, which is fine. And I was not taken by the human aspect of it. But it's not. But I could appreciate the CGI. I thought it looked pretty fabulous on digital. We can't even call it a film. At least those of us who saw it at the big theater in New York. I think the special effects. In Minority Report or terrific. Spider-Man, did it fine?
Spider-Man. Actually, for me, I agree with you about Minority Report, and I think that certainly Spielberg, first in AI and now in Minority Report, is really doing some really extraordinary things as far as integrating the new CGI into a kind of classical cinematic vocabulary.
And doing it absolutely comfortably and thoughtfully. I mean, it's amazing.
And as you say, without showing off about it. I mean, these things happen in the side of the frame.
It is limited to films that take place in the 205 O's or 4s or 1s, or those two movies take place within 3 years of each other, and the world has changed a lot.
These special effects have never been better, and some of them are quite dazzling, even in Attack of the Clones. I really like the special effects in Spider-Man, and I do think Spielberg makes great use of them.
I felt a little too often in Spider-Man I was watching a PlayStation game, and I was a little put off by that.
The special effects in Spider-Man move a little too fast sometimes, but think about it. If you took those effects out of the movie, I mean, as charming as Tobey Maguire is, essentially you'd have a Freddie Prinze Jr. movie. I mean, there's not a lot there aside from Spider-Man leaping around. But I think that even as these special effects have improved and become quite dazzling, they're also crowding out the art of movies, because our response to them is not personal. It's to be dazzled or whatever, but it's not about that connection you make with an actor on screen. And I think that all these movies have that in common.
I think there's one interesting counterexample, or maybe an example of what Owen's talking about, which is The Bourne Identity, which is a movie that is made, I mean, it's very well directed and well edited genre movie. It's not a great movie, but it's a very kind of efficient, entertaining, fast-moving spy thriller that is almost entirely without those kind of big. There are a couple digitally enhanced sequences, but it's really all done through camera angles and montage editing. And there's a lot of editing, a lot of good car chases, and
Did
sort
you find that a relief when you were watching it?
I
to have
did.
it not all tricked out.
And I found it in a way more satisfying, because you could just feel a kind of director's, and in this case it's Doug Liman, who's very talented sort of director who's come up out of the indie world, but a sort of a director's intelligence at work in solving the visual and storytelling problems.
Nothing was at stake in that picture, which
I
enjoyed looking at. All the gray palette might be overdone, and parenthetically, I have to ask why so many of the movies, including very expensive movies, look so muddy these days if they're photographed through screen doors. I like that palette, but to me, they made two mistakes. One was it's about nothing but this guy saving his life. He's not saving the world, for Pete's sake. And it did make one mistake that virtually no other action film made this season. It does not have a family member brutally murdered in order to get the hero to get going, as in Spider-Man, Attack of the Clones, and Minority Report. Interviewed Steve Martin a couple of years ago, and he was talking about the low level to which screenwriters and movie makers had fallen. He said, in order to prove that the villain is really bad, we better have him kill a couple of 6-year-olds.
Some of the most interesting films, I think, of this year are going to turn out to have been not so much violent, but about violence. From Michael Moore's Bowling with Columbine, Gangs of New York, Road to Perdition, Minority Report, in which the guy has a choice of whether to be led along the path of violence or see if he has an alternative. Do you feel like that's come out of 9/11, or you think this is just a coincidence?
Well, except for the Michael Moore film, which is a documentary, I think the others want to be about violence and be violent.
Yeah, Road to Perdition has some set pieces that are. Yeah.
Well, Road to Perdition, which I, by the way, think is wonderful,
yes,
it's violent, but it's almost as if every gunshot matters. It's a sort of considered violence. It's not just kaboom.
That is true, and what the film leads up to really pays off on that for sure, because the film's directed by Sam Mendes, who also did American Beauty, and this is another examination of family values from a much different angle within this 30s gangland milieu, but it's fascinating.
I have to say I found it logorrheic and underlighted. This is, for those who haven't seen it, including some at this table, it's Miller's Crossing with Tom Hanks and Paul Newman, and without, for me, the wit or the moral, not ethical stakes, but like a lot of movies that make a point of their being in the past. seems lit by 15-watt bulbs. It's tremendously
beautiful.
brown. If you like brown, it's
not as much singing as in Miller's Crossing either.
It's as if Edward Hopper made a gangster movie that really is at heart a Western. That's how I felt about it.
Like standing in front of an Edward Hopper painting for a couple of hours.
In any case, what it is way out of season. It's opening next Friday. It is not a summer movie. It's going to be one of the things that we hear about probably, I would think, at the end of the year. Do you think that that's a good idea to counter-program that way, or are we all just...
Yeah.
I think that kind of counter-programming is saving those of us who want to see something besides Adam Sandler movies and even Men in Black 5 or whatever.
None of us want to see Adam Sandler movies.
Well, somebody does. But no, we've had some good examples of it this year. This spring and early summer, I think some of the best movies Hollywood put out were right there in the middle of the summer season. Spider-Man and Attack of the Clones were coming out. Unfaithful, which I thought was just a terrific movie about adultery because it took the evolutionary leap of not judging the adulterous character. It said, well, there are reasons why even a happily married housewife might want to go off and play around, and it created a very morally interesting situation by doing that. Insomnia was a good example of counter-programming. I mean, these are all movies that might have come out at the end of the year, but
these
came out and did quite well.
And we're not trying to make more money for the studios necessarily, but these have become summer traditions. That you have your serious. Saving Private Ryan probably didn't seem like the perfect summer movie, but there are some, and you have the adult comedy. Very often the Hugh Grant comedy, as we do this year with About a Boy, and so I mean there used to be the Harrison Ford semi-serious action movie every late July, early August. So there are such things.
And now there's Vin Diesel.
Well,
the fortunately failed counter-programming along the lines of Enough, the aptly titled Jennifer Lopez picture. You know.
Well, it often seems like there really are just two kinds of movies. There are action movies, and then there are adult thrillers. I mean, more and more, the movies for adults are thrillers, whether it's in the bedroom or Unfaithful was a kind of thriller. It was like a Hitchcock movie in slow motion. Yeah. Insomnia was a thriller. I haven't seen Road to Perdition yet, but from what you're saying, it's a gangster movie. It has elements of being, I mean, that...
Al Capone's name is mentioned.
Yes.
What are some movies that you think have been overlooked, not by critics, but by audiences at this time of year? Is there anything you can think of?
Well, I think there's one on the art house level, which if we had some big art house hits like Monsoon Wedding, Et tu Mama Tambien, that were totally deserving of being. This movie, Nine Queens from Argentina, was just a terrific film, and I think didn't find the audience it deserved. It was like a David Mamet caper movie, except that it was done in a very realistic style, which actually made it more exciting because, unlike the Mamet films where you know it's just a shell game, you could really believe that these cons were taking place, and I thought that just made it a terrific film. Didn't find the audience it deserved.
I would also mention another movie with a number in the title, 13 Conversations About One Thing, which is also something that's kind of working in a set of themes that have become sort of familiar. It plays a lot with chronology and time, and it's about chance and randomness and serendipity. It has some similarities with movies like Memento or Sliding Doors or Run Lola Run or even Amélie. But I thought it was just a very well-written, very intelligent, very carefully structured movie with some very good performances. I know there were people who disagreed, but I thought actually that would, within the sort of the scale of an art house movie would connect a little more.
I felt it was almost too art house in that I thought it was a bit studied and precious. I recently caught up with Late Marriage, the Israeli film, a very, very bitter comedy, which is... it's finding an audience mainly, partially because it's got a much bruited sex scene that's sort of the centerpiece of the relationship between the two characters who are eventually told that they can't be together. But I thought it was overall really beautifully performed, well made, and kind of jolting, despite being funny as well.
We have to say at least that audiences found or are finding The Fast Runner, thanks in part to Tony. And
the first 3-hour Inuit film ever.
But it's the Citizen Kane of 3-hour Inuit.
Did you see only one Inuit this year?
I I've received email from people who have taken their kids to see it, and one said, I lied to them, I told them it was a French movie, but they loved it. I guess of the European films, I'm not sure if it's available anywhere, but Time Out would be the one that I think of most highly for this year, the French film about unemployment.
I'm going to ask you what you think the best films of the summer now as a public service, because I think it's always good to boil it down that way.
Well, I think Minority Report is probably the class of a season with a pretty high level of mediocrity, and that for the art house people, I'd recommend The Fast Runner and maybe Lagan, the Indian film.
Yeah, I'd recommend The Fast Runner too. And if we don't count Unfaithful and Insomnia, which were sort of spring movies, I would say the most exciting big Hollywood movie I've seen is Minority Report. It's not a perfect movie. It's got some plot holes. It basically is a very smart popcorn movie. You don't want to be. I think it's probably a movie to just see once. But there's something so exciting about the way that Spielberg layers the images in it. And he really takes off from the ideas in the Philip K. Dick story, and shows you how in this new invasive culture that the movie is about, it's not just, the internet and credit cards and your privacy that's going to be invaded, it's your imagination. And he's very there's a way in which his direction is poetic beyond what's in the script.
Yeah, I would agree with those. I would add, I think, again, just as what for me has been the most satisfying sort of pure forgettable entertainment film of the summer, I would say The Bourne Identity is worth checking out. Certainly The Fast Runner. Also, speaking of poetic visions of the future,
just got a few seconds,
next Friday at Film Forum, in advance of a national release, is the restored Fritz Lang Metropolis, which
movie
is
I've
really
been waiting to see my entire life, and is fantastic. And yeah, Minority Report, and given how stifling the summer is,
it's unanimous.
Lagan and The Fast Runner could get bigger audiences, which would be a good thing, because they're both very worthy.
Well, okay. I think Minority Report really is something special, and I'm glad you all agree. Anyway, thanks, everybody. Charlie, please come back. We need you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenna.